Welcome to another presentation from the CV Academics Foundation, home of the AMP Honors Program.
Hi, AMP Honors Program. My name is Taylor. I'm one of your super mentors on the platform. I'm here today with Dr. Maher. She is a professor at UW-La Crosse, and I had her for a few of my classes during my undergrad. So why don't we start with, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit, and if you want to just tell us kind of what your career as a professor looks like, and kind of what classes you teach.
All right. Well, my name is, as Taylor said, Peg Maher, and I did my bachelor's degree in psychology at Texas A&M University, and then I did my PhD in physiology at University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And after I was promoted and tenured as a professor at UWL, I went back to school to do about 48 credits for verification for the RD credential. And so I am also an RD, and I did that at Viterbo University here in La Crosse. With regard to what I do as a professor, so for most academic jobs, we describe sort of three legs of the stool, which is teaching and scholarly activity. In my case, would be research, lab research typically. And then we also have service obligations as well. So such as serving on committees. At a comprehensive public university like UWL, about 80% of my job is teaching or teaching related, and about 10% in each of the other two areas.
Okay. What are some of the classes that you teach at UWL?
So I teach a 2-semester human anatomy and physiology class. I teach endocrinology every year. And then I also teach a variety of nutrition classes.
Okay. Do you have a favorite one to teach, or do you enjoy all of them?
Endocrinology is my favorite. After all these years, I would say it's still my favorite. But it's also the most challenging to keep up with.
Yeah, I bet.
Oh, and I forgot, I also teach a freshman seminar.
Okay.
That is actually new to me because it's new to the university. But I've really enjoyed doing that because all of these years I've always been teaching upper level classes and graduate students. And so it's been nice to interact with freshmen again.
Yeah, that sounds nice. How did you become interested in being a professor? Is it something that you kind of always knew you wanted to do, or did something happen that drew you to that?
Well, when I was an undergrad in psychology, I participated in undergraduate research. And then I got a job as a technician at the medical school at Texas A&M. And there I did research with monkeys. And we studied a hormone that regulates salt and water balance in the monkeys. And so, coupled with that undergraduate research that I did in psychology, I just really fell in love with research. And so that led me to explore graduate programs for the PhD.
Okay. So what does a kind of day in the life look like for you as a professor?
So prep for class, teach class, attend meetings, either with students or faculty meetings, grade in some cases, which is my procrastinate duty.
Okay. So you're also on the pre-med committee at UW-La Crosse. How did you kind of decide to be a part of this, or I guess what got you interested in being on
Well, when I arrived at UWL, there was no pre-med committee. And so that is actually something that I helped develop with the support of the dean that was that came around that time. He was also very interested in sort of institutionalizing pre-med programming. And so at that time, I developed the pre-med committee and have served on it since. And we also used to have an MCAT review course prior to the time that the MCAT went to being offered by computer only. And so when it went to that, we stopped offering that class just because there's online opportunities for practice testing and things like that. So yeah, I mean, that's how I got on the pre-med committee. And then also right around that same time, this is about 20 years ago now, a student, Stephanie Novak Maves, who is a family practice physician over on the east side of the state. And I developed the pre-med club.
Oh, okay. What do you do on the pre-med committee? Like, what does that involve?
So the committee, the main function of the pre-med committee is to write what's called a committee letter for students who are applying to medical school. And so we receive materials from students and a request for the letter. And then one of us who knows the student best will write the letter, and the rest of us review it, and then we send it out. And then the other thing that we do once a year, we have an annual meeting that just goes over the functions of the committee for students, and also, gives some advice to students based on the committee members' collective experiences over years.
Okay. If you had any advice to give as a committee member, what would be kind of your top 3 pieces of advice for students interested in medical school?
Okay. Well, plan ahead. Definitely plan ahead and investigate some other avenues too. So, certainly medical school is a great choice for a lot of people, but there are other health professions that, may be more interesting to you and that you might be better suited for. So, just keep an open mind. But if you do decide to pursue pre-med, then definitely plan ahead in terms of the classes that you need to take prior to your MCAT and application, and make sure that you get those classes in before you take the MCAT. Find a job and volunteer activity that you can stick with for a while. So maybe healthcare related, but maybe not. I think service related is the most important thing. But if you find that job and that voluntary activity that you can sustain over a long period of time while you're in school, then I think that looks the best for the admissions committees. Take the MCAT only when you're ready to take it. So, when you've taken the classes, when you've had some time to study for it, and when you've taken some done well enough on a practice exam to feel ready to take it. Don't take it for practice.
Yeah, it's a pretty expensive exam to take if you're not ready. So you had mentioned that you're also received training as a registered dietitian. You decided to do this after you had been teaching. What made you decide to pursue this training?
So I decided to do that so that I would have some clinical experience to share with my students. And also so that I would have more skills when doing human research or, research with human subjects.
Okay. So what kind of careers are available for RDNs, registered dietitians?
Oh gosh, there's so many different avenues for RDs to take. RDs work in schools, nutritionists. They work in industry. So for instance, food ingredients companies, your large food companies like General Mills, they can work in government settings in places like, for places like for organizations like the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, the USDA. They certainly work in local government settings too. So for public health departments, there are typically going to be RDs that work in the community health end of the public health department programs. So things like the WIC program, for instance, which provides nutrition for women, infants, and children. And then certainly in academic settings like myself, in research settings, certainly there are going to be RDs that help to support research. And then some RDs choose to go into private practice. And they may be doing private practice in things like health coaching, or they may be doing private practice associated with the treatment of eating disorders, for instance, things like that. And then, of course, many dietitians work in the clinical setting, in a hospital or outpatient care setting.
Okay.
A ton of things that you can do as an RD. And if you train as an RD, you're going to be taking some business classes. You're going to be taking, of course, all the core science classes that are required to understand nutrition. You're going to be, doing some supervised practice in food service, supervised practice in schools, school food service, supervised practice in community health, and typically supervised practice in the clinical setting as well. So I think it's around 1,200 hours of supervised practice required for dietetics.
Wow. Kind of get a little bit of hands-on experience in each setting.
Yeah, and then that can help you decide, I would really like to work in that setting or
Right.
not for me.
Yeah. So you had mentioned that you got the RD licensure for research purposes and to provide more of a kind of experiences to your students. What kind of research have you done at UWL in regards to this?
Yeah, so early on when I first came to UWL, most of my research was with animal models, typically rats or mice, and studying things like appetite regulation and insulin sensitivity and insulin resistance, and things like that. And then as I progressed with my nutrition training, then I moved to doing more work with human subjects. And so with human subjects, I will, working with students and students' interest areas, we develop projects that study individual nutrients, phytochemicals that come from plants, and their effects in terms of tolerance and efficacy when you're consuming them in human subjects. And so, I've received some funding from places that are wanting their products to be tested for tolerance and efficacy. And then there's some funding sources from the university that students can take advantage of too.
Okay.
So that's another piece of advice I would give to students. If you are interested in undergraduate research, find a mentor that's doing work in the area that you are interested in, and they may have, funding for projects already. And fit you into, an already funded project. But most universities are also going to have funding pots for students to be able to apply to and receive some supplies money at least, and in some cases, some travel money to attend, local or national meetings. Yeah, so definitely, look at what your university has in terms of resources for undergraduate and also graduate student research. If you want to do like a master's in between your undergrad and medical career. Some students find that that's, if they weren't as serious a student in the beginning of their student career as an undergraduate, maybe just didn't really get going early enough, then that is a good way to transition and show that you have become a very serious student.
Is that common do you see pre-med students or others get a master's degree before attending medical school, or?
I wouldn't say at UWL, I wouldn't say it's common, but I would say, it definitely happens. It's definitely a route for students who have, again, not performed as well in the beginning of their undergraduate career. And want to demonstrate that they can perform academically. And so, it's not something I would suggest for a student just because medical school is such a long path. It takes a while. And so adding 2 more years in there or 3 more years in there for a master's degree, it might not be worth your time. But definitely if you need to show or demonstrate that you can, succeed in those rigorous courses, then that is one way to do that.
Okay. So I have one more question for you, just kind of as an overall, what would be maybe your favorite and least favorite part about your career, if you have any?
So my favorite part is actually these interactions with students like you. So Taylor was my student. Yeah. And so that's my favorite part, right? Is getting to know students like yourself, who really are excited about learning and curious and interactive. So that is great. Probably the least favorite thing that I do is grading. I'm going to say that again.
Yeah, I think that might be a common thought among teachers and professors. Grading would be the least favorite part. Well, is there anything else you would like to share with the students on AMP Honors Program?
Well, what I would say is do the thing that you love to do. So, you're going to spend over a third of your life and your days, right, teaching or in your profession. Mine is teaching, right? So do the thing that you're going to love doing because you're going to spend a lot of time doing it. Good luck to all of you.
This has been a presentation of the CV Academics Foundation, home of the AMP Honors Program.